You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. There's a million limiting excuses that we can bring into our mind. What I want to share with you, and the thing that I'm really trying to say to myself, is we can have change any moment. We don't need to be limited by anything. Hello, and thank you so much for joining me today for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. My name is Felicia, for those of you who aren't familiar with me quite yet. And I am a teacher of gentleness, self-love, self-care, self-compassion, all of those things. And some of the ways I do that is through teaching yoga and meditation. But what I also do is do this podcast where I get to share a little bit of what's going on inside of me, things that I'm dealing with, facing in my life, and knowing that those things, me just being myself and being a human, going through this human experience, some of what I'm going through is going to connect with stuff you've gone through or may be going through right now. And hopefully that will give you just some deeper permission to be gentle with yourself, to love yourself, and maybe even some encouragement to try things in a new way. So, how does that sound? Does that sound pretty good? This past week it felt like a really long one. I feel like I've been kind of off this week in the sense of I've been getting like a lot of energy going at night. I've always been a little bit of a night owl. And as I get older, I don't know if it's society that's put this idea on me that's like, you need to be a morning person. You need to be a morning person. And I've had times in my life where I was, but a lot of times I get very inspired in the evening. Dave's been going to bed really early for us. And so I've had a lot of quiet time to myself in the evenings. And I find myself, I'm very creative. I get a lot of ideas going. My mind starts, in a way that's really good for me, just helping me connect a lot of ideas and get a lot of inspiration going for myself. But then, of course, I'm up really late, and then it kind of messes with my whole sleep cycle. And so I've had quite a few days like that in a row. And I feel like I'm carrying it with me today. Like, I feel like my eyes are puffy, even though I feel like I did sleep relatively well. It's just like the whole schedule has got me really off. And I guess I'm just feeling it in my physical body today. And it's interesting because I'm trying to embrace this creative space that I'm in right now. I'm feeling a lot of shifts, some of which I'm going to share throughout today's episode. But I'm just comparing what I'm feeling right now to what I felt when I took 4 weeks off around Christmas. And I thought I was going to feel a lot like this then, but I didn't. During those 4 weeks of my vacation, I really felt like I was in this cocoon where there were no ideas happening. Like, there was just me in this kind of safe little shell where I wasn't having ideas on things. I wasn't having major breakthroughs. I was just kind of, I don't know if I was just coming back to myself or if I was just kind of, I don't know how to describe it. But that really scared me, if I'm being honest, because I'm changing directions in my life a little bit. I'm shifting my focus. And for so long, for the past 8 years, my business, my photography business, has been my baby. It has been my major focus point. It has been what I've poured all of my resources, my passion, my intellect, everything into. How do I run the successful wedding photography business? How do I help couples? How do I give them an amazing experience? How do I connect with other amazing creatives? And it's been amazing. In fact, I was just talking to Dave about this last night. Like, the more clear I become about the transition in that business, the more I realize, like, I live with absolutely no regrets. Like, every single part of running that business and what I've learned and how I moved through it has been incredible. It's been an amazing experience. I wouldn't trade it. But when I was becoming a photographer, I didn't really think about the long-term ability to sit with that. where you have to perform a service for someone in exchange for them giving you something back, which is usually money. And that's going to be how you get through life. And it's been hard on my body. And it's also been, going through the pandemic was just really hard. And then leading up into last year when Dave started to get really sick and we had all of these jobs booked and it created so much stress, it just made me realize, I'm like, this is not sustainable for life throwing unexpected things at you. Because if something were to happen to me, if I were to get sick and I weren't able to, complete my end of the bargain, the amount of stress of trying to find somebody, luckily I have a team of photographers who are amazing and could help me. But financially, is that actually going to work, right? It's not very sustainable. And so it's led me to realize, like, I'm ready for something different. I'm ready to pivot, and I'm going to be doing that this year. And it feels, when I was on vacation and realizing I'm like, things have to change, I'm ready to change. And it was kind of just, honestly, the entire vacation was me just starting to really come to terms with, okay, I have to make a pivot. And then once I got back from vacation, started turning that boat in a different direction. I feel like that's what I'm still doing right now. And now that I've got my boat facing this different direction, now it's like all of these different ideas are starting to click into place. And really, I'm starting to be inspired. I'm starting to see paths forward. I'm starting to realize other things that I want to work on. I'm starting to realize where I want to put my energy, what I want to talk about. That part's still a little bit more fuzzy, but I'm starting to see a new path. And so that's what I'm going to be talking a little bit more about later this episode. The heart of today's episode is going to be about, we think things take forever to change, but actually things change really quickly. So we're going to dive more into that. But first, let's dive into today's astro segment. I love astrology. I love learning about astrology. It's probably what I'm doing up half the nights when I am staying up way too late, is just studying astrology. And we are in the final week of our lunar cycle that began on January 2nd. So as the month starts to come to a close, we're in the last full week of January. We're also ending the first lunar cycle of the month. One of the things that I love to do is use the lunar cycles to work on goals instead of just a single month or, a random amount of time, or some people just like to work on things for one whole year. Sometimes I think that working on it in these with the lunar cycle can be really amazing, because not only do you have kind of this energy flow that is very cyclical that you can tune into, that can help you and support you, but you also have nature's reminder in the sky. So how often does that happen? This has happened to me so much throughout my life, where I'm like, I'm going to be working on this. And I even get my journal and I'm, working on this, and then poof, something happens, something comes out of left field. I shift my focus, my journal gets buried under something, and then 3 weeks pass and I'm like, oh wait, what was I working on? Like, I find that journal and I'm like, oh yeah, I was supposed to be working on self-care and my sense of enoughness, and I haven't even thought about that in 2 weeks. Has that happened to you? Well, what I love about working with the lunar cycles is that it's a short enough amount of time that you can really work on concrete goals, but it's also a long enough amount of time that you can kind of notice things change and actually make some progress in different areas. And then what I was going to say is that it's nature's reminder in the sky. So when you walk outside or on your drive home from the grocery store and you see the full moon in the sky, you're like, oh, here we are. We're 2 weeks into the lunar cycle. That's right. I'm working on these things. I'm feeling this illumination. I'm noticing. And it's kind of like nature is there reminding you that you're inside this cycle. I really like that. Maybe I'm a little bit of a nerd in that way, but it works really well for me. And here we are in this final week. And so if you look up into the sky, you're going to be noticing that the moon is going to be moving into the darkness. And I feel like this is such a good reminder for us. And I know from what I've heard from a lot of you that you're kind of feeling this same thing right now where it's like, okay, things have been a little crazy. Things have been a little heavy. I'm needing to draw inward right now. I need things to kind of, they don't necessarily have to slow down, but if they can calm down, it's like the river ahead of us is, long and winding, and the river we've just gone down is a little crazy and rushing. But if right now can just kind of be calm, we can kind of come back to ourselves and kind of close the things that we need to close up, and also start to prepare and get ready for new intentions and new seeds we want to sow as we begin the new moon cycle, the second lunar cycle of the year that starts next Monday on the second new moon in January. But really, it's going to be for the month of February because, let's face it, that's where the majority of it's going to be. So what do we do with all of this? One of the best things I think you can do during this final week of the lunar cycle is take time to get quiet. So maybe those 20 minutes that you're usually on your phone, on Facebook or Instagram or doing all of that stuff, maybe you put that down for a few minutes and you just let yourself stare out the window. Maybe when you get home from the work or the grocery store and you're sitting in your car, instead of, rushing inside or again, being on your phone or making that phone call or whatever, you just allow yourself to sit for a few minutes, whether you're looking out at nature, which is always a good thing, or whether you are just enjoying the warmth from your heater, or you are just letting yourself kind of have a little bit of space. Anytime you can catch some space, grab it, hold on to it tight, and let yourself sit in it. That's going to be, I think, the number one tool for this week, for sure. I was going to say for hands down, but that's not a phrase, but it's definitely a Felicia kind of phrase. So I'm going to leave that in, even though I'm cringing a little bit and telling myself to take that part out. I'm just going to let it go because that's something I would totally say. Another thing that I wanted to make sure we touched on during today's astro segment is that the sun has moved officially into Aquarius, and we are in Aquarius season right now. So we're in a certain zodiac season when the sun is in the sky. So right now, sun is in Aquarius. We are going to be talking about Aquarius themes throughout the next month. But some of the ways that we can do some self-care during Aquarius is really tapping into the air element. The air element, think of, if I were to tell you that I'm an airy person, I'm not really an airy person, but if I were to say I'm an airy person, what are some of the things that you would automatically start to judge about me? Or think of people who you know are really airy, or another word would be like flighty. Usually these people are very creative. They're filled with movement. They're hard to pin down. They could have their head in the clouds, right? This is what the air element can be like. And for some of you, you're like, oh, I hate that stuff. Like, I like people who say what they mean. I like people who are slower, all of that stuff. That's fine. You get to have your opinion. You get to think that. But we all need all of the elements. We need the air for inspiration, for motivation, for new ideas, for creativity, for thinking outside of the box. And so that is something we're going to honor this month, or at least that you can honor. And I've got a couple ideas for you. These are things that I mentioned in last month's lunar guide, a little sneak peek into Aquarius. And some of those things have to do with communication. So communicating is a really fundamental way that we can use the air element for self-care. You can communicate with other people. If there's something that you need to say to somebody, or if you just need to have a good long talk with somebody, like talking, sharing, listening. And it doesn't have to be a friend, right? Like if you're feeling a little antisocial, or your friends feel like arm distance away right now, you don't want to pull them in, you can listen to a podcast like you're listening to right now, right? Like this is air element self-care for sure. Another way you can do it is by focusing on the conversation with yourself. You can journal. You can use your notes app on your phone or your dictation just to stream of conscious, communicate with yourself. And then finally, another way would be to communicate with the collective. So if you have a platform like a blog, or maybe you want to use Instagram or some kind of social media, putting your ideas and yourself out there to the collective to share an idea or something that is going on for you. That is air element, Aquarius kind of themed self-care. The second idea that I have for you is brainstorming. So how often does it happen where we have this problem? And this could be short-term, something that you've been stuck on for a couple days, or it could be something you've been working on for a year, right? Like the same thing that you want to make progress on, but you're not making progress on it. And how often does it happen that you actually spend time brainstorming what is your obstacle or why you're getting tripped up there? I'm pausing so that you can have this rhetorical answer, this light bulb moment of realizing, like, maybe I'm not actually spending that much time brainstorming what I want or what's not working or what I wish could be different. Maybe I'm just kind of going to that place where you get stuck. Like I'm picturing like when you get the tires stuck in the mud, or like you're like lifted up in the snow and your tires can't touch the ground. Like you're spinning your wheels, but you're not going anywhere. And you're just doing that over and over and over again. Well, brainstorming is like getting that shovel out and like creating a path for your tires to move. We have to give ourselves time to brainstorm new ideas. And the hardest part about brainstorming is crossing from the area of where you're stuck into the path of where you're going to get new ideas. And that can be one where you don't see progress right at the beginning. It takes a little bit of a gateway. Usually it doesn't actually take that long, just longer than you usually quit. So brainstorm, sit down with maybe a blank piece of paper. And if you're not a very linear person, which I think a lot of us are not, just start with the middle of the paper. This is what I want to fix. Like I want to make progress on my bedroom, right? Like my bedroom has all this stuff going around on it, or maybe it's your office space and things aren't functioning well. I've got these things I need to solve. This doesn't feel good. And then just start writing. Okay, in this corner of the paper, I'm going to write what I wish it could be like. And then in this side of the paper, I'm going to write if in an ideal scenario, how I would solve this. And then just get some new ideas going. And then before you know it, you're going to be coming up with new solutions, new information. That is so an Aquarius vibe. And just pausing in the middle of my little self-care spiel for Aquarius, I just want to remind everyone that as we go from Capricorn, which is all about ambition and execution and creating resolutions, right? Like there's a reason why we do have Capricorn around New Year's. It's this very strong get stuff done energy. Well, sometimes we have all this motivation, we know what we want to get done, but then we get stuck. And it's so cool to me that Aquarius follows that, because Aquarius is this air sign that does think outside of the box, that has so many unique ideas, very highly creative. There's a reason we can come into that to start to say, okay, where do I need to pivot myself in a different direction? So this is good timing for this kind of stuff right now. The final Aquarius self-care idea that I have for you for this next month is dare to be different, okay? This one can be tricky for those of us who are a little bit more conservative, or we just like to be like normal. That's something that I've like always had this fine line with. Actually, I'm going to say this really embarrassing story. So when I was I can't remember if it was 7th or 8th grade. It was definitely middle school. I had this headband. I can't remember if it was like beaded. So I had like a really cool design on it. And I wore it like right I can't believe I'm telling a story. Like right like around the front of my forehead, like I think where my like it barely met my hairline, kind of like somebody would in the 70s, like you were more like a band around your head as opposed to like an actual headband. And so many people would make fun of me, but I swore I looked so cool. I thought I looked awesome. I thought I had this 70s vibe. That's like back in the 2000s when like bell-bottom jeans were more in. Not even bell-bottom, just like flare. Like call me flare. But I remember that. And then I remember the moment where I started to feel ashamed for that. And when I stopped doing it and I shut that part of myself down. I feel like that is what I do not want you to do during Aquarius. If you have like a love for wearing mismatched socks, wear mismatched socks. If you have a desire to start growing out your grays and you don't want to give it F what somebody thinks of you, like do it. If you want to put color in your hair, if you want to make a big change, if you want to, and it doesn't have to be with something you look like, right? Like this could be anything. If you want to just be different, if you want to become a vegetarian, if you want to change something about yourself or the way that you're moving through life, or you want to get off social media, or you want to just do something different, you are allowed to do that. You do not have to be the same. You do not have to stay the same. And Aquarius is so good at setting new trends, trying new things, at being unique, at being different. So if there's something big or small that resonates with you, do it in the spirit of this Aquarius season. You've got this. This is a perfect time for that. So I guess that can kind of wrap up our astro segment today. Hopefully there's lots of tidbits in there. What I really love to do with astrology is talk about it in a relatable way that whether you like astrology or not, just hearing these little things, these little tidbits gets you to think outside the box in some way or another and continue to consider how you're taking care of yourself. That's what matters the most to me. So we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back and we're going to talk about things changing. So like I mentioned at the beginning of today's episode, I've been thinking a lot about transitioning and changing things in my life. And it's been a little bit of a scary pivot because I felt the need to turn the ship, but I didn't know where I was turning it. And I was feeling a ton of fear around that, even though everyone in my life who I had been talking to was like, it's okay to change your mind. That was kind of step one. I really needed a lot of affirmation around you are a person who's allowed to change their mind. You are not stuck. You don't have to be the same. You don't owe anybody anything. So if you need those reminders, those are there for you too. And I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, but recently I was on the phone with my sister and I was having an especially kind of dark moment, just feeling a lot of kind of like deer in headlights, like in a place of fear, in a place of kind of not knowing, feeling like I needed to have answers that I just truly do not have right now. That has been kind of my theme of this month, is I feel like I'm expected to have a lot of answers to things I just don't have answers to. That really sucks, by the way. It's like not a good feeling. But, you know, she reminded me, and it was such a powerful reminder in the moment, that, you know, sometimes things change really quickly in life. And what she really did is just kind of point to what happened for her, which is last year in May, she went on a work trip to visit a different office than she was working in, where there's a friend of hers that works, and she was able to stay with them. And this was down in Orlando. And so she was able to go to Disney and able to go to Harry Potter World. And she just had a really fun trip. But more so, at the very end of her trip, she ended up extending it a couple extra days. And I was FaceTiming with her, and I just noticed that her entire vibration in this FaceTime call looked completely different. She looked like a different version of herself. She looked happy. She looked relaxed. There was just literally a different vibration coming off of her. And she said kind of jokingly, like, yeah, everyone says like I should just move down here. And it just like, it's like everything sometimes kind of clicks in a moment. And it was like in that conversation, she went from not even seriously considering it to by the end of it being like, okay, maybe I'm actually going to do this. Like maybe I'm going to actually start to think about, can I even move down here? Is this realistic? That was sometime in May of last year. And by the beginning of July, she was moving across the country, picking up her entire life and moving down there. 2 months prior, didn't even know that that wasn't an option. Wasn't even trying to manifest a move across the country. And since then, so many things have fallen into place in her life. And it made me realize, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like things change very, very quickly. I mean, if I were to ask you right now, what is the one thing in your life that changed your life completely, and how fast did that happen? Like chances are for most of us, it wasn't, oh yeah, I went to college for 4 years to get a degree in this, and then I got a job in that exact thing, and that is just what set up my life forever, right? Those aren't the things that I mean, those things are good too, or can be good for us too, but those usually aren't the things that pivot us in these directions that we need to go in. Sometimes those things come in like a gust of wind. And I was even thinking back to this in my own life. You know, I've told this story before and probably different variations of it, but I went from in the year in 2014, I went from, I think it was like the beginning of October. I rented a camera that I was like, I'd been shooting Nikon up until this point. I was like, I really want to switch to Canon. I know this is a different Canon camera. I use it for another job. I was like, this is the one I want to get. I rented it, did a session I did like 7 sessions in one weekend just to kind of build my portfolio for myself with this other camera. Opened my photography business. My lease was up, ended up moving into my parents', quitting a job that more stable job completely unexpectedly, moving back in with my parents, and then, my back got thrown out. So, and then I ended up getting a new job at Apple, of all places. If you know me at all, you know that technology and I are not always friends. Ended up getting a part-time job at Apple to support me while I opened up my business. That happened from the beginning of October to I was starting to work at Apple in the beginning of January. So within 3 months, my life changed so much. And in the beginning of that October, I didn't even know that any of that was going to be happening. So I guess if you're in a place where you feel like things just aren't changing, or where you want to make changes, but you feel like they need to happen really slowly, or that you know where you want to go, but you're just not getting much momentum, I think it's a good reminder, or at least it was for me, just to have more patience. Because when things do change, sometimes they change really hard, really fast. Like sometimes we get thrown through the biggest whirlwinds that kind of push us into those new areas of our life. I mean, even me with everything I'm kind of transitioning through right now, over the past couple of years, I've just still been really growing the business. I have an assistant that works for me. Last year, I started getting help from in the social media area of things with my business. I'm talking about my photography business with this. And even in November, like I was having a conversation with one of the contacts that I have a really great relationship with. We did tons and tons of contracts together the last few years. And I was just like, yep, everything's on track. Like we're talking about being burnt out. And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, like things are crazy and I'm feeling crazy, but I was like, but don't worry, like everything's going to be fine. Like I'm definitely on board for next year. And I'm not even kidding you. A week later, I had to call her and I had to say, I am so sorry, but I'm actually breaking that contract. Like I'm not renewing my contract anymore. And I felt horrible, but it's just like in one day, one day in the end of November, it was like everything I needed to know about the future came to me in that one day. You need to end this contract. You need to change the direction of your business. You need to move in a new direction. You've got to figure stuff out. And so boom, 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 things start happening. It's like I ended up having that conversation with her, and then I had to have a conversation with Dave. And I thought it was going to be a really scary conversation. It ended up being a great conversation where we were just like we thought things were heading in this direction, and they weren't working out how we expected them to. And it wasn't working out in the sense that like things were falling apart from a external perspective. They were falling apart from an internal perspective. Like we weren't getting the support that we needed in this adventure in our lives. And so even then, that was the end of November. And before Christmas, he had interviewed for a 9-to-5 job, got the job, and is now working that full time. So it's just a reminder, right? Things do change quickly when they do change. And for me, I just keep coming back to that statement and sharing it with you because for me, there was so much comfort in hearing that. Not even, I mean, there's something kind of alarming about that too, right? Like sometimes when we think about that, we're like, holy crap, like talk about the amount of stress. I mean, even like becoming pregnant, right? Like I'm using that as an example. Is like sometimes you have 9 months to figure it out. Sometimes you have less than that because you don't find out you're pregnant until much closer to your due date. But you only have this certain amount of time, and relatively like thinking of like becoming a parent or bringing a new child into your life, like 9 months is a long time, but it's a short time too. And that's the same way I can't even imagine if you're going through something like adoption and then you find out of the blue, or if you're a foster parent, all of a sudden you're bringing new kids into your house, right? Like that is a huge thing, can come out of nowhere and change. And I guess it's like anything in life. Like that's what it comes down to, is like life can change in a single moment. We all know it. We all know those stories. We've felt those stories in our lives. And I guess sometimes those stories can be a little bit scary, but focusing on the positive side of it, sometimes, especially when we're thinking about what we want to manifest, what we want to create, what we want our goals to be, what we want our life to be like, it's so easy for us to put up all of these limits. That's never going to happen. That's not realistic. I'm not meant for that. The market is too crazy. XYZ. There's a million limiting excuses that we can bring into our mind. And what I want to share with you, and the thing that I'm really trying to say to myself, is we can have change any moment. We don't need to be limited by anything. And by constantly being kind of plugged into that, what if everything turned out great? What if I got these ideas? What if I changed my business? What if I close one business and open a new business, and I'm doing even better with that business with everything I've learned? I'm not starting from scratch, right? I'm starting from already this top of this mountain I'm already on. Sometimes you're going to lose things. Sometimes you're going to gain things. Sometimes you're going to be without a job for a little while, and then you're going to find something new that you want to put your time and energy into, and it's going to be great. There's no reason for you to sit here and limit yourself, and there's no reason to say that because things haven't happened, there's no momentum around it. You can find change at any point. You just have to be open and ready for it. And I think for many of us, we just have to be ready to respond to what's around us, right? Because maybe it's that trip you go on that changes the course of your life. Or maybe it's that phone call that's coming in, right? You never know. So stay hopeful, stay open. That's what I'm working on. I think that'll do it for today, you guys. How does that feel for you? But I guess you can't respond back to me right now. You guys are going to probably be making fun of me for this episode, but that's okay. Sorry, setting some crystals in a different spot here so that I can get to our cards to do our card drawing. I like to end each episode with a card drawing, just something, little message from the universe that can add to today's episode. So this is and it already popped up. That is so funny because that does not usually happen. This is the Wild Offerings Oracle deck, and this card just flew right out of it, so I'm going to read it. Enjoyment. Striving and pushing makes life into endless hard work. The more you're inviting love to take over, the more enjoyment comes. Sorry, try not to cry. Allow me to enjoy this life, dear Lord. Sorry, that one really just got me because it's such a better way to say what I've been trying to get to this episode is we're all going through life, so we might as well just enjoy it. So often we're doing this like hard sludge work of dragging ourselves through the mud, thinking that we're the only ones who are pulling us along. And what if we're just inviting love to take over, inviting ourselves to be of service, inviting joy into our lives, and then responding? You know, if we're here for anything, it should be to enjoy this life, right? So that is the perfect card to end today's episode. For those of you who are new to the podcast, I hope you hit subscribe and you tune in each week. New episodes are on Tuesdays. If you haven't had a chance to leave a review on Apple, iTunes, or Spotify, wherever you leave or listen to these podcasts, please know it would mean so much. And when you do that, it actually helps the podcast to grow, which would mean so much to me. And if you want more from me, you can check out my website. I've got free lunar care guides on there each month. I create a new one each month. You can go there, you can download it, you can check out blogs and other free things that are on my website. And then you could also check out my YouTube. I've got a couple of free meditations on there as well. But if you want more and you want to get tons of content from me, join my Patreon. You can join for as little as $6 a month, and we have different levels all the way up to $18 a month. But that money goes directly to support this work and what I'm able to do and how I'm able to grow. And in return for supporting me, you're going to get those lunar guides delivered right to your inbox. You're going to get tons of gentle yoga classes that you can watch at any time, tons of guided meditations, ad-free episodes of this podcast, and hopefully more. If there's something in particular that you'd want from me, please throw me a suggestion. I'm always open to that. And yeah, we're just going to keep figuring this out. So thank you for being a friend and a patron. And until next time.